Welcome, everyone, to day 2 of Civics 201, Issues in Policy in Central Texas for the breakout session, Moving Forward, What's in Store for the Next 12 Months of Transportation Policy. My name is Alicia Palacios Woods, President and CEO of the Austin Young Chamber, and it is my pleasure to introduce your speakers for this session. Moderating today's discussion, we have Tina Bowie, Coalition Liaison and Operations Manager for Transit for Austin. Tina will be interviewing Representative Celia Israel. Representative Israel represents District 50 in the Texas House of Representatives and has been a long-standing champion for transportation and multimodal solutions. Tina and Representative Israel, thank you so much for joining us today. We are sure this will be an exciting discussion, so Tina, feel free to take it away.
Okay, I apologize for that delay. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here today, Alicia. So this is going to be fun. Representative Israel, we've got a lot to talk about. And I think as previous speakers, Casey Barak and Sandy Hint just spoke to before, this region keeps growing, right? Population, everybody knows, every 20 years we double. We're going to double in another 20 years from about 2 million people to 4 million people. And traffic is just consistently ranked as our community's #1 concern. And with COVID, there's obviously been a little bit of a lull, but it's going to pick back up. And, like Alicia mentioned, you've been working on this for a really long time. You've been working on transportation at the state level, at the local level. You've been a leader in many fronts. And so if you were to be the transportation queen, right? Governor Celia Israel, something like that. What do you think we should do to fix transportation in the Austin area?
Well, I take a deep breath, Tina, because I have been working on this a long time, as have you. And it's unfortunately has been a political struggle at the local level for us to move forward on a vision, on an initiative. And it's also been difficult for the state of Texas, who has gone through its ups and downs with our transportation budget and our ups and downs with politics, where we have a Texas Department of Transportation that unfortunately has been less able to support transit projects. And of course, what we're talking about today is throughput. And if you want to talk about solving our transportation problem, you've got to get people out of one person, one car, and more people into either telecommuting or more thoughtful transit solutions. And unfortunately, I don't believe that our region or the state has stepped up to the plate for the growth challenges that we've been experiencing. Now I'm a not so young woman, and transit is something that takes a while to do. And we're still adding 1,000 people a day to the state of Texas. I do have, a glimmer of hope is that the state of Texas, we finally had Governor Abbott quoted as saying that he was in I think it was a Rotary Club in San Antonio last year, where he said the era of roads is over. Well, the era of building new roads is over. And I know some people might cringe at that thought, but if you think about it, you can only build so many pavement miles. The question is, are we going to be more smart with that pavement and make decisions, because growth is happening and windows of opportunity to build things are closing because a parking garage comes in and it cuts off an access, or utilities need to be moved. And it's not like Star Trek, where you can just kind of hit a button and somebody's beamed over. You've got to move people. And so I see a glimmer of hope, but in terms of what needs to happen, we have an opportunity. I know we'll get into Project Connect, but I think the legislature is going to come back in January. And although we're going to have a big challenge in terms of the economic recession that we're in, and we're quite not sure what are the body blows that we're taking as a result of COVID and the dramatic changes that we're going through. And redistricting is a big deal that the legislature's got to deal with. So budget and redistricting are two big rocks that we're going to have to deal with. But in the course of doing the budget, we look at each agency individually, and we've got to be. We can get in maybe in some of the Q&A, but Tina, you and I know that TxDOT doesn't give money to transit authorities, and I hope that after my time in the legislature, I can look back at the state budget and see that the state is more of a partner with cities and transit authorities, as opposed to what we see right now is the governor sort of creating a wedge between the city. We should be partnering together at every opportunity, and these transportation is not a political thing. It's just it's a leadership thing, and do we have the vision to move forward? So it takes a long time to do. I know people are probably very impatient with us in government, but we meet every 2 years, and I hope that after we meet this session, that we'll be able to look back on the TxDOT budget and see that there's a little more flexibility there for transit and putting more throughput into our system.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. A couple of thoughts, because in regards to the inability to build more roads, right? And I think kind of a popular phrase nowadays people talk about, it's like the math and the geometry, just in terms of space, but then also the math of the money. And kind of in an interesting way, I didn't think about this before, but from a financially, I think, conservative, the most financially responsible approach to me is mass transit, because you're moving more people, like you're talking about the throughput versus like a car. Think about the number of people you can move, on mass transit. And so one would think, I think a fiscal conservative would appreciate, right? Yeah. Mass transit from that fiduciary perspective.
Well, Tina, let's give people an idea of, if we look at, I don't have to go to the West Coast to have an example of a city that's doing well with multimodal solutions. Go up the freeway, go to Dallas, Texas. And back in the 80s, Dallas was making plans for, I don't know, I think they've got 4 light rail lines. Some of them are elevated. They've got some really cool stuff. It came as a result of conservatives and progressives coming together to say, this is good for our quality of life. It's good for our economy. And they started moving money back in the 80s and drawing down federal dollars back in the 80s and the 90s. So, we ain't getting any younger. And unfortunately, the politics has gotten more divisive. I wish I could say that transit and the solutions that you and I are talking about were not political, but unfortunately they have been. I hope that we're all hitting the big reset button on November 3rd when we vote, and we'll have a more reasonable approach to this kind of a topic.
Yeah, I know. So I'll say this, and this was lingering in my head before we got on the call, and I was thinking, like, how do you? I mean, what would you say to somebody, right? So to your colleagues across the aisle, down at the Capitol. I mean, how do you convince them that different alternatives to moving people need to be considered and they need to be funded? I mean, like, if you were sitting there and you were just talking to somebody one-on-one, somebody you felt very comfortable with, to one of your peers, nobody has to grandstand or speechify in front of anybody else. I mean, but what would you say to them to try to compel them to funding different ways of moving people than a single occupancy vehicle?
Well, the suburbs in Texas are changing. The systems that we're all looking at, whether it's I-35 or a new bus line to Williamson County, they're starting to affect people. It's not just an asset for the urban core. It's an asset for these regions. And if you look at Austin and San Antonio, it's a mega region. So, in terms of having conversations with my colleagues, it's not a stretch, because we're all stuck in traffic together. We all have constituents that are not happy. I think there's a big space there to have a common sense conversation that is just about what can we do together. Years and years ago, we established the Rail Relocation Fund, but we haven't put on hardly anything in it. So we began, but we didn't finish. And so there's lots of good conversations I can have one-on-one. There's the House, which I remember the House. There's the Senate, which has 31 august, esteemed members of the Senate, led by Dan Patrick, who's the Lieutenant Governor, and of course Governor Abbott. So, and the governor's greatest authority is his ability to appoint people to boards and commissions, and he appoints the Tech Stop Board. So, perhaps we're seeing a glimmer of hope with the governor's not announcement, but his comments of last year. But it might take a couple of cycles for us to move forward.
For sure. Well, maybe we'll switch a little bit because we'll switch to the local level, like you mentioned with Project Connect. There's a lot of big things going on at the local level, and I think certainly. I guess, I don't know, selfishly, I'll just say, let's go right to it. Let's talk about Project Connect. So in my mind, I can't remember when we met, but I know that when I met you, you were, and you still are doing a lot to advance public transit at the local level. You know, I know you're one of the founders of the Alliance for Public Transportation. And you still remain involved to this day. Still remain involved in championing transit here at the local level. And so, let's talk a little bit about Project Connect. I don't know if you want to give an overview, if you want me to, but I was curious to hear from your perspective, particularly like thinking about your district and extrapolating that onto other parts of the city. You know, what are you hearing from your people in your district, and why do you think our community needs Project Connect?
Well, Tina, let me tee it up for you to give some details. But government moves slowly, and I ain't getting any younger, and I am becoming exhausted from the politics of a city that has not taken action. It seems like every 2 years we either lose an election by a very slim margin, or we present nothing to the electorate, and that's not leadership. And that's not Austin. Austin is the 11th largest city in the country, and we forget that. Like we're not some little hayseed college town that people come in here for college and then they leave. Austin is a leading voice when it comes to all kinds of things, but we are not a leading voice when it comes to something as significant as the infrastructure of transportation. We're not that good, and and our transit authority has had some problems over the years. But I think we're at a really cool spot where Cap Metro has had relatively new leadership, is in a good financial place despite the recession, and we're talking to the young leaders chamber. I think the younger you are, the more you're like, why don't we have all of that other stuff that I had when I was in Dallas or when I was in Chicago or wherever people might have come from, or those who grew up here in Austin are like, I'm tired of this stuff. So why don't you tee up what Project Connect is, and I'll just simply say this is a generational opportunity, and I'm tired of losing opportunities.
Yeah, I'll echo. Yeah, we'll talk about. I'm happy to talk about Project Connect, but I'll also say, yeah, I'm with you. I was lucky to have my family move here when I was a kid in the early '80s, and yes, we've had many battles and fights over this, and it's amazing. I felt also lucky that early in my career, I got to kind of be involved and watch the 2000 election play out. Sandy and Casey spoke to that earlier, and it's incredible that 20 years later we're still talking about it. And I cannot imagine, right, if we would have built that out by now, right, why do we have to keep having this argument? And I'm not sure what's going to fall out of the sky and fix our transportation problems, but in my opinion, it is not more cars, whether they're self-driving, whether they are electric, any of that stuff. You just cannot physically fit more vehicles in the public right of way. So anyway, I'm with you on being done with having this conversation. But yes, Project Connect. So for folks who don't know, Capital Metro has spent the past several years working with the community to develop a comprehensive plan for regional transit expansion. And they have collected, I think, over 60,000. They have 60,000 touch points with people to develop this plan. And the plan has expanded rail system. It has an expanded bus system, and there's all kinds of other features where it's not the traditional kind of fixed route system that people think of. So I want to emphasize that because I know that's something that's come up. But yes, on Project Connect, the rail lines, there's going to be 3 new rail lines: the orange line, the blue line, and the green line. And the orange line would go through the center of town, I guess, so you could look at it that way. It would begin in North Austin around the North Lamar 183 section and go down south all the way down to Stastny. So it would stop at places like the Crestview area, UT, Republic Square, Auditorium, South Congress. Again, an area that in 2000, if we would have just approved the ballot item then, would have gone down South Congress. People could take the train, have a left side out on South Congress, not deal with parking and traffic. And, and the parking I know is an issue for the neighborhood down there. They have concerns about it. Whether you agree or disagree, the reality is they don't like it. So the blue line also, that's one of the other lines. And this one would follow kind of a similar path through central Austin, but then it would go out east towards the airport. So that one would go down Riverside, Lakeshore through the Montopolis area. There'd also be a new park and ride. We'll get to that out in that same McKinney Falls Metro Center area. But that blue line would go out there to the airport. And so imagine, we all travel and we go places, and in many communities, it's very common and normal to be able to get on a train from the airport, go to where you need to go, your hotel, your friend's house, your relatives, whatever. So perhaps Austin can enter the 20th century and have a train, out from the airport. So, and then the third piece is that green line that I mentioned. And this is fantastic because it utilizes the existing rail line that runs through the Eastern Crescent out to Manor and through Colony Park. So that will service the Springdale area and also the 183 area. So that is another rail segment for Project Connect. There are also, sorry, I forgot to, I don't want to do short shrift to the red line, but there are some improvements also slotted for the red line, the existing Metro Rail service that runs. So there's some improvements that will allow frequency to be increased during times that we need more trains and more frequency on the red line, because there are standing room only times on the red line. And then also there would be 2 new stations, the McCullough Place that would service the new Austin FC station. And then also another one, I think it's Broadmoor, but to service the Domain. So obviously a very growing, booming part of Austin, that north central part of Austin. So there's a red line piece. Also, related to the rail system would be a tunnel through downtown. So there would be a tunnel through downtown because, as we all know, if you go downtown, right, oh my gosh, what a beast to go through downtown if you're in your car. And so through a short section of downtown, there would be a tunnel to help facilitate the movement of the trains and also help reduce gridlock up above ground. So if you are in your car, you're riding your bike, whatever, trains are underground, the cars and other people are moving above ground. There is also a major bus expansion plan, like I mentioned. So Metro Rapid, the kind of red and gray black buses that people see that go the 801 and the 803, Lamar, Congress area right now today, Burnett. There are 4 new Metro Rapid lines planned. And so this is great because these are those high frequency buses that can move people a little more quickly. They've got technology, right, to help the drivers go through the lights and everything, to go safely proceed through the lights and give transit that priority that, in my opinion, it deserves. So there are 4 new Metro Rapid lines. There is the Gold Line that would go from the ACC Highland area to Republic Square. That would go from there to downtown. There's also more service that would go east, go to the Expo Center from East Austin between UT and downtown. And then also Southeast Austin, Pleasant Valley. There would be another Metro Rapid line, and it would serve, it would be connecting like Miller, depending on what you call it. I know there's differences of opinion. So that would go and service that east and southeast area, and as far down as the Goodnight Ranch, a new development that is being planned, master plan down there. And then also there'd be a Burnett line that would go from the Domain, all the way to far South Austin to Menchaca and also out to Oak Hill. So we get some service out into Southwest Austin.
The point, I guess, Tina, is that none of this gets built quickly. None of it doesn't get built at the same time. But if we continue the mistakes of the past and keep saying no because this wasn't the perfect plan, then we are doomed to continue our really bad reputation for having poor movability solutions for our area. And I know you want to talk about affordability, but before we go to there, I thought we would talk. One of the things that we're looking at is MOPAC. Since we did anything big on transportation, we have two new managed lanes on MOPAC, one in each direction. We will soon have the similar lanes going from downtown out to South MOPAC. But for now, I think it's important to know not every solution is a rail solution. Sometimes it's just take the existing pavement, take a better bus, meaning a high capacity bus, and Cap Metro is doing really good things with their purchasing to make sure that all future buses are electric buses. That MOPAC Express bus line had the last numbers I saw in the before time, which I call pre-COVID, ridership was up by about 60%. So I've often said people are not anti-transit, they're anti-inefficiency. And if you've got a smart way for people to connect to transit and make it easy for them, they'll easily take it. And so it's cool that as we're going to build out transportation solutions in the future, we are going to build out I-35. Let's make sure that I-35 has those same transit throughput additions to it. We can't keep thinking of the same old. Houston has a reputation, an old reputation. They're doing really cool things now with transit, but in the past they thought, well, I'll just build more lanes and then everything will be fine. Well, you build more lanes and it just fills up with cars. You got to build more creative ways for people to say yes to different solutions. And it can't be just that I'm going to buy my $500,000 condo in downtown Austin and I'm going to walk to Apple. That's not realistic. So that's not my world. I'm beaming to you live from Northeast Travis County, out here by the landfill. So we ain't got it. But I'll be, I'm supporting, us growing our system because I want more people to have more options, and I want to be safe and smart with our infrastructure investments.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, yes. And thinking about the district that you serve, and speaking to the affordability part, so I'll use that to segue to that. The affordability part, that is a huge component of Project Connect. That's a huge component of providing people different options, is the affordability aspect of it. And then also within the Project Connect proposal, the City Council has included $300 million for anti-displacement measures and affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about that a little bit, because again, when I think of different parts of town that could benefit the most from Project Connect, Northeast Austin, your district would, I hope, can benefit greatly from Project Connect. There's a lot of services planned in that direction. Can you talk about some of the things, maybe some of the ideas that you have for coming up in the session, or ways that transit and affordability intersect, or efforts that you've worked on in the past to help move that needle forward?
My first response is the way I normally make money is not by being a state representative. It's I'm a realtor, and it hurts my heart to tell clients you have to just keep driving until you can afford it. Sorry, you can't afford Allendale. No, you can't afford Crestview. But just keep on driving, and once you hit Elgin, then you can buy something, and that's wrong. But the fact of the matter is that people have been having to move farther and farther out to find a home that is a good fit for them, for their budget and for their family. If they have a way to be a 2-car family instead of a 3-car family, or a 1-car family instead of a 2-car family, that's a huge cost savings for the family. Those tires, gas, maintenance. it's safer. Um, so we should think about those people for whom they are transit dependent, but there's also people who just want more solutions so that their family budget isn't squeezed so much. The North Lamar Runberg area comes to mind. The number one bus right now is the bus that is full. By the time it comes in from Runberg and Lamar and hits St. John's and Lamar, hope you get a seat. It's full. So those are all my constituents that are coming in that are working in the urban core, that want thoughtful transportation solutions. And sometimes it might look silly for some people because it's just not in their frame of reference. But I think younger people get it. When you look at the little bike garage there on Airport Boulevard, I know at first people were like, why do you need a bike garage? And I think when you're younger, you think, look, I'm going to take the train to this station, then I'm going to get in my bike and I'm going to ride 2 whole miles and I'm going to, get my blood going. I'm going to take a bike to my apartment or my house. To me, these are all ways to give people different solutions, and it's freedom. And it means I don't have to be tied to another loan for a car, or my car needs a radiator. And we've all been there. And I just want this city to rise to the occasion of the growth that we've been experiencing. And we are generally, our demographics are young and diverse, and those people think it's cool that I can take the train and take the bike. But then there's some intractable old school people who are like, oh, I can't be spending my money on that. Well, it's not for you, it's for your neighbor. And that's the kind of the mindset that I think we need to get into.
Yeah. Well, I would say for me, I do have the luxury of being able to drive, where I need to go, when I need to go. But I also, yes, I would love to be able to take transit, and then I want to take it because, climate change, right, is looming. It is bearing down on us. I look at the future of Austin. I have a little child, right? I don't want him to be stuck driving all the time. But I would say also that, even for folks who drive, Project Connect will help you because, honestly, if I get on the bus or if somebody else gets on the bus and the next person gets on the bus and the next person gets on the bus, that's blank number of cars out of your way. So even if they do not get on the bus, I think that Project Connect will still help them because that's, X number of cars out of their way. So Project Connect, I think, definitely has a lot more benefits than just kind of the basic mobility that we think about, when we're thinking about transit projects. And so I think, for example, yes, like going back to the just, mentioning the $300 million that the council included, transportation is so integral to so many things. It's so interconnected, right? Like I think there is growing awareness, and also hats off. So thinking about, younger folks, thinking about the audience with the chamber, I think that kind of awareness that all of this is connected. It's part of a bigger quality of life, right? Like you said, they want to be able to ride their bike. They want to walk to the station, this and that, right? They are very knowledgeable and aware and concerned about climate change. All of these things work together. Equity issues that we see being magnified right now during the time of COVID and making us realize that, yes, all of us, I think every day, hopefully we're opening our eyes a little more to our privilege and recognizing that we need to help our friends or neighbors, like you said, essential workers, right, who are depending on transit. Capital Metro is still carrying, I think, like 40,000. They're still providing like 40,000 trips a day. And so this philosophy and mindset of, I'm never going to use it, why would I pay for that, right? That's a pretty privileged standpoint to take when a lot of our neighbors do depend on transit. They need it. They don't have options.
There's an old saying in Texas politics from former Speaker Sam Rayburn that says, any jackass can knock down a barn. It takes a carpenter to build one. I hope that the next generation behind me are into, what are we going to do? What are we going to create? What's our dream? Let's stop being the negative knuckleheads who just want to say no to everything. Those people drive me crazy. Tell me what your value add is here. What are we going to do? So I hope that folks won't get too tired of me and Tina talking about transit, I hope you share in our vision, because we love Austin, we love this region, and we have high expectations, and I hope that our audience appreciates and wants those same expectations. And climate is a part of it. I think, I've been advocating for transit for years, and I remember when I first started getting into the topic, about 20 years ago, I would mention the environmental impacts, and people like, oh, nobody cares about that. No, just don't mention it. But now it's a real thing. The air quality is, Austin is always on the verge of being in and out of compliance when it comes to our air quality. And I think San Antonio is out of compliance now. So there's healthcare repercussions, and then there's just the healthcare of our planet, which is real. And this is one way for people to say, okay, maybe I can't take the bus or the train every day, but I could take it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I'll get a little walk in, or I'll get a little bike ride in. That's, to me, that's a kind of community I want to be a part of.
Yeah, I agree. I very much agree. I agree. Well, it looks like, I think we've got about 10 minutes left. And so I'm wondering if, one of the items also we were going to talk about, and you spoke to it at a broad level, but just I want to give you the opportunity, if there's anything kind of as a wrap-up question, thinking about as we move to the next session of the legislature, so next year, is there anything in particular that you would highlight as something that you foresee the legislature tackling? Obviously, like you said, the body blows, we don't really quite know yet. We're getting a glimpse, right, with COVID, but presumably funding will be more tight, and there'll be a need to prioritize projects, prioritize efforts. What might be your primary focus going into the session next year?
Well, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be redistricting is a big deal. By the way, if anybody hasn't filled out their census form, please do so. You can do it online. It takes you 10 seconds. Once we're counted, the numbers come into the legislature, and then we reallocate congressional lines and our own legislative lines. And I feel that Texans are going to vote in historic numbers this November the 3rd. We just know it. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm for this election. That's going to have ramifications for the kind of legislature that you're going to have. I'll give you a little bit of an example. Last year, the legislature put in about $5 billion in cash into our public education system and other adjustments and supports of public ed. The election before that, in 2018, was a historic election. We hit near presidential levels. Did that public ed money come about because out of the goodness of our hearts, we decided, oh, let's do something for public ed? No, it came about because Texans voted in tremendously large numbers. After this election, I hope that we will come back to Austin and get together, and it will, I guess the point I'm making is that large voter turnout in and of itself has an opportunity to reframe the important issues that your state has to deal with. So simply by voting, and we're going to vote in large numbers, that will also help to recalibrate what is really important. Do you want to fight over who gets to go into whose bathroom? No. Or you and I can have an honest disagreement about transportation policy. Like, I think people are okay if their state representatives are fighting over infrastructure as opposed to fighting over make-believe crises. So I would encourage everybody to vote. Google who represents me, and the Google will tell you who represents you. And for those of you in Travis County, you go to travisvotes.org or .gov, travisvotes.gov, and you'll figure out, make sure you're registered to vote. So I don't care who you vote for, just go vote and pay attention.
Hear, 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 hear. Okay. Thank you, Representative Israel. Thank you so much. Well, Again, transportation is a really big issue, and you spoke to this too. But I want to jump into some of the participant questions. There are some folks who have posed some questions, so I want to try to give a little bit of time to answer those. And so, one of the ones talked about affordable housing. It was related to affordable housing, and you spoke to that a little bit. And it's right. I forgot about that. That your kind of day job when you're not, buried in session is being a realtor, and that nexus between transportation and housing. And so the question that was asked was, how does transportation policy affect the creation of more affordable housing? So can you speak a little bit to the nexus between transportation and affordable housing?
Well, it's critical. I think we've come a long way as a community. We used to just say, build whatever you want to build, and you think about the implications later. There's a wider gap between the haves and the have-nots now. You can't disagree with that. And it's not like it's, to give you an example here in my district, there's an affordable housing project, which is, coming in and around the North Mopac area. There are individuals who are working at Apple as entry-level software developers who qualify for that affordable housing. And for that entry-level software developer, it means they're saving money and not spending their income on housing, and can put money aside and grow wealth. On the other hand, there's families who may not have access to that kind of a project. So we need more support for workforce housing, and tax credit housing is popular. Unfortunately, the state agency that does that is the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. They are basically just taking federal money and funneling it through. So there's a place there for the great state of Texas to put resources so that we have more of those kinds of projects. They're dense. They're usually very smartly located next to transit or transportation solutions. And it helps a single person or a small family not spend so much of their money on their rent, so that they're building wealth, building their credit, and can buy a house sooner rather than later. And I'm a big believer in that. And transportation, as we were alluding to earlier, it can be a way for somebody to say, I don't have to have 2 car payments. I can just have 1 car payment. And I drop my wife off at the park and ride, and I go to Ground Rock or whatever. So it's an important question, and something that we need to be addressing.
Yes, absolutely. I think I've heard the statistic that if you could go from a 2-car household to a 1-car household, if you could get rid of a vehicle, you could save $10,000 a year, right? So imagine if you had $10,000 extra. I mean, that is. Gosh, well, nowadays in Austin, right? But a mortgage payment is like, could pay for higher education, pay for childcare for your a pre-K development for your child, all kinds of things that you could do, in my opinion, that are much better than paying for a car. And then also, what I forgot, I wanted to kind of do this plug. I know I'm interviewing you, but I wanted to point out, especially thinking about you being a realtor, I've also heard the statistic that for every dollar you save in housing, on a national level, so this is a national average, but for every dollar you save in housing, you spend about 78 cents on transportation, right? 78 cents more on transportation. So what's that, 22 cents? And you think about how much time people spend in their cars. I don't know, to me, I can do the math, right? We can all do the math. That 22 cent difference, that's worth it to me for the time, the quality of life, the stress, everything like that. So, okay. So I think technically we have 3 minutes, but I'll do this one because this one's been upvoted, I think, by the people. And you spoke to this a little bit earlier too, I think, kind of tangential. But the question is, do you think there are Texan cultural elements that have impeded more public transit? And so, how do we persuade Texans to make this investment?
Whoever asked that question, you just hit the nail on the head. It's the and I get it. I mean, I love cars. I love to drive. During the COVID, if I go to HEB, I go to the HEB that's a little farther down the road, so I can get a little more of a drive-in. it's fun. I understand that. And so there is a cultural element of those wide open spaces in Texas. But the reality is that Texas is an urban state. The cities of Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin are are I think collectively in the top 12 of the cities in the country. So your state is an urban state, and we need urban solutions. So there are still some in the rural areas who are going to push back, but I see it becoming less and less of a cultural issue. Even our friends in the rural parts of the state respect the environment, and we could make that connection. So I think that might have hindered us in the past, but I don't see it hindering us as much in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I want to go back to something that you said earlier that, you're talking about health issues, climate change, affordability, all of that. Again, in my opinion, it's like all of it is so tied. Like we cannot keep looking at transportation as its own standalone thing. And so if people, as there is growing awareness about the intersection of all of these things, I would hope that people can get out of their cars. We're all going to drive. I drive too, right? But we do need changes because the traffic is not getting any better and climate is not getting any better. People are dying. We have a record number of traffic deaths. All of these things, I don't know how continuing down the same old path that we've been continuing down with just single occupancy vehicles is going to fix any of those problems, right? We've got to work on that. We've got to do all those smart things like you're talking about with roads, but then we've also got to add kind of another element of transit.
I will say, Tina, that I think this November 3rd election is hitting a big reset button. And regardless of my party affiliation, there is a big cleaver through the heart of this country right now, and it's not good. It's not good because it means that we're not coming together on things like infrastructure, which should be an innocuous, nonpartisan, non-political issue. And whether your big issue is children's welfare or infrastructure, affordable housing, wage gaps, all of these issues can be better dealt with when we are less fractured as a country and as a state. I can tell you, my colleagues and I are very weary of fighting over social issues. It's exhausting. It really is. It's not fun. But we look forward to moving big rocks like transportation forward. It feels good when you can work across party lines to have an impact for this state. So I'm always glass half full, even in the year 2020. I'm wearing a nice blouse and shorts and flip flops, but I know that there's some good things around the corner. So again, to wrap up, please vote, make your voice heard, fill out your census, and I pay attention to this most critical topic of infrastructure, which is not very sexy, but definitely needed.
I agree. I think our sound cut out, but I agree. So thanks so much for making time to talk to all of us today. And thanks to the Austin Young Chamber for putting this together and getting this information out to your membership. So I think maybe Alicia will come back on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I am back on, and thanks to everyone for joining us. And we'll, of course, have our closing network session here at 5:30, so you have the links, and we look forward to seeing you there. Representative Israel and Tina, thank you so much for joining us again. We look forward to all that we can accomplish in transportation this year and next.
Bye-bye.